Chat show.
Perhaps we could start by talking a bit about how you approached this commission at the showroom. And the commission's part of a program called How to Work Together, which is a joint program between the showroom, Chisenhale Gallery and Studio Voltaire. And one of the reasons I was interested to work with you is because the way in which you tend to work with organizations in a way that somehow goes beyond the sort of traditional artist or sort of standard artist-organization relationships, in the way that you tend to kind of embed yourself within an organization and find ways to intervene into an infrastructure, which I thought was, for us, an interesting way to think about how do we try out different kinds of relations with an artist, or how do we experiment with our own infrastructure and do that in collaboration with an artist. So perhaps you can talk a bit about how your methodology and how you kind of approached this commission.
I guess I'm interested in production, not from a very solitary, let's say, or autonomous kind of position, but how these autonomies kind of work with and against each other in social relations, and that social relations is what produces a certain set of other relations, let's say. And so, for me, these social relations become a kind of material for me to work with, a kind of departure point to kind of investigate what sets of relations, first of all, but also limitations are happening within a set of relations, let's say, within a situation. In a sense, it's kind of not site-specific in a certain way, but it definitely tries to approach a situation and agitate those relations, I guess, to see what can come out, I guess. So it's an experiment as well. So from my position, it's also an experiment for me, as it might be as well for the organization, let's say.
So what drew you to our heating system?
I mean, I guess what I wanted to do was agitate something more infrastructural about the showroom, less content-based, I guess. A lot of the budget for How to Work Together comes from a book project I'm working on, a kind of a fiction that I've been working on for a year, which involves another organization called If I Can't Dance, I Don't Want to Be Part of Your Revolution. So there's a kind of a parallel, or there's a combination boiler here. One side of this boiler is this fiction, this very solitary work, and the other side is kind of working with the infrastructure here. And so I met with the plumber here and asked him that if I would take away the radiator, one of the radiators from upstairs, what kind of prosthetic or what kind of prosthesis would we need to replace it with? And he suggested double glazing was the only way to go. Or secondary glazing was the only way to go. So I guess from agitating the heating system here, then we go through different sets of relations all the way from the plumber through to you and the other staff here, through to the nature of the commission itself, the nature of the budget and contracts and all of these different architectures around these sets of relations, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to just go from this one heater and then be driven off in all of these different directions, you know, and having to expand on the sets of relations that I would normally get involved in with the novel, let's say. Yeah. I
think this exhibition, in a way, is a kind of I see it as a kind of midpoint, because there are a lot of elements in the show which are kind of part of a process that's still kind of in motion. Right. So, on the one hand, you have the kind of when the glass, which is a sort of stand-in for maybe an ultimate conclusion, which would be the secondary glazing. Mm-hmm. and the radiator which has been taken out. And there's also a book that's in progress while you're here. So it feels like the exhibition itself is part of a process that's a kind of more long-term one than the period of the exhibition itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm interested in this in relation to ideas of performance or performance art, let's say. I do a lot of performance work, or I have done, and I'm interested in how that can relate to the ideas of event culture and also this fundraising thing, let's say. And I'm interested in the temporal nature of stretching these things out, you know, so the nature of the performance can include these sets of relations in a more involved kind of way, I guess, no? Which is what brought me to thinking about this writing project in the first place, this elongated temporal nature of 2 years commission with If I Can't Dance. And then with you guys, we have a failure clause, of course. We don't know what will happen yet, but all of these discussions are happening over the time, I guess.
And one of the things that struck me working with you on this exhibition is that you kind of worked with what's here in most cases.
Yeah.
So things that were around at the showroom have kind of ended up in the exhibition. And you kind of worked with the building and the social relations. So I think, is that something which you see as part of your kind of
practice in general? Yeah. It is, yeah, I think.
And the same in the book, that a lot of things that happen over the course of the year in connection with other things you're doing somehow find their way in. I mean, I like to work with sets of limitations, let's say, because sets of social relations are limitations to a certain degree, as a relation of the self to somebody else, to the other, let's say, and material limitations and conceptual limitations. And in a way, I think we can be very creative with these, or we have to be, let's say. And so, on the one side, I wanted to not use so much money on producing things, but then, so let's say, for instance, health and safety meant that I had to create these footnotes here to be able to, for the glass to stand in the room. So all of these sets of limitations created solutions. And on the paintings, and also on the footnotes, and also there's a performance that you did at the showroom a few months back where all of them have something in common, which is that they have a lot of elements from very different sources embedded within them, where you're kind of somehow not separating things, but seeing everything as part of a kind of, I mean, I guess as embedded within, there's a kind of, there's no kind of borders between things, between what's public and private, or materials that come from very diverse sources. So how do you kind of
It's kind of difficult, I guess. I mean, it's a difficult kind of, it's kind of also, I see it as a parallel structure of these kind of social relations and the social nature of production and difference. And I see, I mean, as a kind of aesthetic operation, it's kind of a collaging, I guess, which is how I also work with text a little bit. I mean, William Burroughs is one of my favorites, and he's down there, and Kathy Acker and things like this. But I mean, I guess it's about kind of including all of these things into this landscape, or allowing these things to inform ourselves in a very, I guess, a very transparent kind of way, you know. But if you see all these reflections in these disclosure dramas, that's what these glass kind of pieces are called, there's also a kind of, there's a confusion that happens in there, and I'm kind of interested in how these things intersect, I guess, and weave and obscure each other and agitate each other and things like this, I guess.
So this is the radiator that you removed from upstairs, and It's called Him, and you talk about it as a kind of muse. Perhaps you can say a bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, when I guess I think about the social relations, let's say, the situation of coming in here and agitating it. Part of that is to allow some of these processes to become other to themselves. So I wanted this kind of very pragmatic thing to have a kind of a state change, you know. So he's become the kind of muse for the whole thing, and he's nestled here with all of the books and texts that I've been walking around with, and resting on these little mattresses that come from Showroom and some carpets from yourself. So I mean, it's all been provoking these other kind of intimacies as well, I think, along the way. And yeah, so I use it kind of as a library as well, this thing. And I guess people who come here also can use it as a library to kind of see what I've been reading in regard to the show, but also to the book. This is the wishing well. This is the blood from the muse, or from the heater, from him. It's kind of not as dirty as I expected, but in a way, this is a wishing well because we need to kind of somehow raise perhaps more money for the secondary glazing upstairs. So I wanted to present it as an object in itself, but I guess I didn't know really how to present it, but I thought somehow this kind of large foyer type vase was a nice way to present the essence of the project somehow.
So tell me about the glass.
So the glass, yes, it's. I wanted to kind of each of these slices of glass each represent one of the windows upstairs, and I wanted to kind of somehow theatricalize or poeticize this kind of sets of relations. So I wanted this kind of very elemental situation: heat, the blood of the muse, glass. And so we had to find a way to kind of bring that in here. And health and safety has prompted me to somehow find solutions for that. And so I've kind of used the architecture here and made an estimation of it. So this is also kind of my kind of almost camouflaging myself in the infrastructure, let's say. But it's a kind of, it's only an estimation thereof, so it doesn't function too well. But so the glass, these pylons that it stands on, the support structures are kind of a mimicking of the showroom's architecture, I guess.
And the feet?
They're footnotes, I guess, to these disclosure dramas. And I've been, over the time, collecting all of my boarding passes, library cards from New York City, old phone chargers, coins, and they're all cast in silicon, in shoe boxes that people from here, I have one of your sons, shoe boxes. Yeah, we had to kind of find a solution of how the glass would stand in the room, and so these became a kind of a formal decision or conceptual decision of how to allow that to happen, I guess.
Great.
Yeah?
Move on. So tell me about this series of paintings.
Yeah, they're paintings, collages, and part of this, part of the commission as well in the heater is this a series of exchanges between us. So these are actually normally blocking out all of these windows here, and part of working with the showroom in this capacity is about thinking about transparencies and disclosures, but these are more about somehow dealing with opacities. So they become more and more overloaded, more and more excessive.
So you've been adding to them
over the time, yeah. And then I will use Mr. Stockholm Syndrome over there and shred some documents also that come from our sets of discussions, and these will be used to create a kind of script, I guess, here. Mm-hmm. Yeah? The curve of the back that was formed as he bent forward, in that awkward moment when the heels and toes are released from the legs and gusset of one's pants, contained something. It became the contour of a vessel, a tipping teapot. This bending action created a negative space one could see right through, but something charged it full. He was lost in a solitary moment, thinking the ceramic curve of his spine kept it contained. But I saw there an acrid infusion born of his shame, his failures brewing. For a split second he imbibed before he returned upright, recalled his half-ready dick, and the sparkle of confidence returned to his eye.